Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm making beef stew, and I'm going to start by patting dry and then cubing up my roast, and I'm also going to remove as much fat and gristle as possible before I throw it in the pan. Now you can use chuck roast or just regular stew meat if you don't feel like chopping up your roast, but I'm using a sirloin tip roast because it was a really inexpensive cut of meat that I've never worked with before, and I just wanted to give it a try. It was a little tougher to cut than a standard chuck roast, but it did end up really flavorful and tender in the end, so I'll definitely be using it again. This is where it started getting a little harder to work with than I'm used to. There was a really hard pocket of fat or something in there that, I don't know, it just really didn't want to work with me. So I just ended up cutting it all out. I do feel like I wasted a little bit more meat than normal, but I like that I could cut out all these hard bits. Like when you buy stew meat, not all the cuts are the best, and a lot of them aren't even salvageable because there's so much weird stuff running through them. So I like cutting up my own meat for that reason. It does take a little more effort, but I feel like it yields a better quality meat in your stew. Once I got my roast all cubed up, I'm going to go ahead and sear it in a really hot cast iron dish that I'm going to be making the stew in. And I did season this with some steak seasoning. I seasoned it before I put it in the pan, and then once I got it in here, I hit it again with that same seasoning. But right here, you're not worried about cooking your meat through. We're just searing it, giving it some flavor and color like normal. This is really how I cook most of my meat. If I'm cooking it in the slow cooker, the oven, I really like to sear it and lock in those flavors because I think it makes it better in the end. Normally, before I add my meat, I go ahead and cook my onions and garlic and celery, but I was going with onion powder and garlic powder this time. I didn't have any celery, and I really didn't feel like cutting up onions and garlic. So if you want to cook your vegetables before your meat, that's perfectly fine. Some people cook them after their meat, but just know that if you're gonna do your flavor vegetables, you want to do that before you add in all your other ingredients like your beef stock and stuff like that. A lot of people like to cover their meat in flour and then add their beef broth. I prefer my stew to have a little more gravy consistency, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw in some butter to that same dish I browned the meat in, and especially if you cook your vegetables in this, it'll have a lot more flavor. But then after the butter, I'm going to add some flour and make a roux type of thing, and then make gravy from that before I add in all my other vegetables. I used a 1/4 cup of flour and then about a 1/4 cup of butter for this, and then I ended up using about 4 or 5 cups of beef broth. I just added in my beef base and then slowly added in more water until I got it to the consistency that I wanted it to be. I did add some Worcestershire sauce as well as some tomato paste. I'm not sure where the clip of me adding the tomato paste went. I don't know if I didn't record or if it just got deleted or what happened to it, but I did add in tomato paste as well as Mrs. Dash seasoning because there's so much salt in the beef broth and the Worcestershire sauce that I didn't want to add any extra salt to it. So once I got all the liquid and seasonings where I wanted them to be, I went ahead and added back in the meat, and then I put in the carrots and potatoes too. Now, you can add anything you want to beef stew. You can add mushrooms or whatever else you want. And like I said, usually when I make it, I do add onions and celery. I just didn't have any celery and didn't feel like dicing the onion. But you can really add whatever your family likes, whatever y'all like to eat. It's your kitchen. You can make it how you want to. This is just what I had on hand and how I wanted to make it this day. So I let this cook for about, I would say 4 or 5 hours. I'm not really sure exactly how long, but I let it cook a little above low. So on like 1.5 or 2, because I really wanted it to soften everything up. I didn't want hard potatoes or carrots, and I wanted the meat really tender and cooked all the way through. But this turned out really, really good. Every time I make beef stew, it's a little bit different. I don't really have a go-to recipe. It just depends on what we feel like eating that day. And I did serve this with some rice, but you could definitely have it just plain with bread or however you wanted to eat it. So this is what it looked like whenever I put it in the bowl. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you'll subscribe and stick around.